On this episode of Deputy on Duty, we meet background investigator David Pate, who has served in so many capacities at the Leon County Sheriff's Office. One time around wasn't enough.
This is actually my second trip with the Leon County Sheriff's Office. I started here originally in 1987 as a reserve deputy, and I worked here until 2002. I was a uniformed patrol deputy. I was a school resource officer at both middle and high schools. I was a detective in several different units.
Pate's career also included time at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and in 2004, he ended his full-time career with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission.
Probably my most favorite assignment was I was one of the academy captains delivering in-service and advanced training to almost 1,000 officers statewide. Sergeant Collins?
Yes, sir.
Pate returned to LCSO for both professional and personal reasons.
Then Sheriff Campbell was the person who actually walked me out the door and said, "You've done a good job here. This is your home, and you can come home anytime you want. And if I'm going to come back and do something work-wise in this arena, I want it to be something where I feel I'm doing something worthwhile." It is kind of interesting because there are still some people here that I worked with, and we tend to have a lot of, "Hey, do you remember when?" conversations.
One of those people he worked with was Assistant Sheriff Steve Harrelson. In 2001, both were detectives working at the agency.
We had a case that occurred in 1981. A visitor from New Zealand was touring Florida, and this lady was the victim of a very violent sexual battery and attempted murder.
Both Pate and Harrelson were in high school at the time that assault occurred. 20 years later, advances in technology provided the investigative resources to crack open the case.
This was also during the time that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement began their DNA database. Well, we had DNA evidence on this particular case, and we got a hit.
For Pate, nothing was more rewarding than informing the victim years later that justice prevailed.
Probably the most humbling and interesting day was working with Interpol to work with authorities in New Zealand to find the victim, because that's where she lived. I did get the privilege of getting to speak with her and tell her we found the person and he's been arrested. Very humbling, very humbling. And that was a good day. That was a good day.
In his current role with LCSO, Pate is one of 3 part-time deputies.
I'm assigned as a background investigator, and we do pre-employment background investigations of all employees who want to come to work at the Sheriff's Office. Civilian, correctional officers, correctional techs, deputy sheriffs, any position that the agency hires for. Good morning, this is Deputy Pate with the Leon County Sheriff's Office. It's a lot of telephone calls, interviews, and a lot of interpersonal conversations with employers, associates, people that know the applicant and the applicant themselves.
Pate points out that he gathers all the information but makes no recommendations as to hiring candidates.
All we do is we're finders of fact. We find the information, we report it, and we reconcile any discrepancies or derogatory information that we find. And then the command staff, all the way up to, and this is important, all the way up to the sheriff, actually read and sign off on our reports.
And not having the final say means taking his job all the more seriously.
There's been a lot of focus in the last few years on law enforcement backgrounds and hiring, and we've got to make sure that we're getting the right people in there, because we get the wrong applicant doing a critical job for this agency.
Pate's affinity for digging into the past doesn't stop with potential hires. He's also a contributor to LCSO's museum.
When I was here, I was part of the Criminal Intelligence Unit, and that particular patch is my design. It's a novelty patch. It never was officially worn on anything uniform-wise, but we had that logo and utilized it. There was a nurse that worked in the detention facility and used her own funds and had these patches made up where it says Leon County Sheriff's Department and a medical tab. There are only 4 sets of those that I know about. You know, it's just those one-off things that get lost to history if we don't keep telling the story about them.
Whether or not the candidates that cross Pate's desk will have the same highlighted career experiences he has had, no one can say, but he does have advice for those who wish to work for LCSO.
People who are consistent in their work and they've got a goal and it's something that they want to do, they may not be able to tell you why, but they know that they want to do it because they want these outcomes. And people who are focused on goals and are focused on seeing results from their actions, those are the best employees, I think.
It's not often when someone in law enforcement embraces the milestones of others while having made his own. What our deputy on duty desires most, however, is that history will one day speak kindly of him and all his years of service.
I know there's people out there that I've had an impact on their life, both in a positive and sometimes in a negative way that ends up turning into a positive for them. It's rather unnerving when someone walks up to you at a dinner table in a restaurant and goes, "I don't know if you remember me, but you arrested me and I wanted to thank you for the way that you treated me." Or, I needed that to happen in my life. Or even, "I'm sorry that I put you through that." I would hope I would be remembered as fair and people would say he was a good cop.
To learn more about how you can serve the community with the Leon County Sheriff's Office, visit our website, leoncountyso.com. I'm Angela Green for Leon County Today.